Hey everyone, it's Michael. I hope you're doing well today. I'm sorry it's taken so long to get around to finishing up this book and doing this review, but I finally read and finished Marvel Essential Ghost Rider Volume 2. Now, I've been kind of jumping around between the Claremont X-Men stuff, Punisher, and this. Reading one volume at a time. I'm trying to get better about that because these are bigger books. As many of you know, they're like 550 pages a lot of the time. And there's a lot of content in here. And I love Marvel Essentials. Dude, Ghost Rider just keeps getting better and better. And again, for anybody who may find this review who hasn't seen my review for Marvel Essential Volume 1, I have all 4 volumes. I've never read Ghost Rider until I read that previous book, and I always wanted to. And as I read this, it just keeps getting more and more badass. Yeah, it has its holes in the ground that your foot gets stuck in for a page or two. There may be an issue. But I would say about 90% of the time, this book is so good. I loved it. Let's talk about some of the creators here. We have so many people involved here that you would not even believe how talented these guys are. It really gives a great testimony to the kind of talent that comics had in like the 70s. I think this was the 80s by the time that this book's comic issues were coming out. Marvel Essential Volume number 2 for this collects Ghost Rider number 21 through 50. And a lot of those talents start off like Jerry Conway, or Gary Conway, however you say his name. Isn't that the creator of Punisher? Am I nuts? I'm pretty sure that is. That explains a lot about both characters. He writes a few issues, then Jim Shooter takes over. And Jim Shooter writes like 5, I think. Well, he does like the script for one of them, and Jerry Conway does the plotting for it. But the rest, Jim Shooter writes after that. So he does a total of 5 issues. And Jim Shooter's stuff is really good here. I love Jim Shooter, God rest his soul. Probably, in my opinion, the best editor that Marvel ever had, or editor-in-chief, whatever that position is called. He was hated by Marvel staff back in the day so deeply, the writers and the artists. And it's because he made them do their job and have quality. Yeah, he's probably kind of hostile and mean about it, but the dude was a fan. I have my problems with Jim Shooter. I don't know if anybody of you know, but in the previous volume, in early Ghost Rider, towards the end of that first volume of Marvel Essential, they started introducing a character called the Friend that they symbolically reveal is Jesus Christ, the Son of God, my Savior, my Lord. And I was hoping that they would pick up more on that in this volume. I was really excited about that. And apparently they dropped it, and that's because Jim Shooter was like, no. And the original writer who had come up with that idea, I forgot the writer's name at that point, or the creative team's name at that point. Forgive me for that. But they were bummed out about that because they wanted to continue with this. And Jim Shooter wouldn't let them do it. And whoever else was in editing staff would not let them do it. They interfered heavily, thought it was a bad idea. I, and not just as a Christian, I as a creative, think that was an awesome direction they were going. The stuff they did with Johnny in Hell and dealing with Mephisto or Satan himself, that stuff was so good in Volume 1. But anyway, Jim Shooter's here. He still brings a lot to the table, and it's good shit, man. And then after that, you have a Roger McKenzie author taking over for a little bit as a creative duo with Don Perlin. Don Perlin pretty much, alongside later on Michael Fleischer, they do the majority of this book. And it continues to maintain really great quality almost always. There's very rarely an issue. Those issues are very creative, very fun. A lot of the time they're standalone, but you'll have like 2-parters here and there and stuff. And they kill it between Fleischer and Perlin. But like I said, Perlin starts off at first after Jim Shooter stops his little run with Roger McKenzie writing. And Roger McKenzie, I think, does a really solid job, too. I really like their team up. The art looks really incredible there. I would say, like, maybe a fifth of the way into this book, the art gets so fucking cool, and they finally drop the whole, mostly drop, the kind of Ghost Rider with eyeballs thing. And I'm really glad about that, because, like, you could do that and make it scary. These didn't do that. In my opinion, maybe they were thinking Ghost Rider was too scary for kids or too dark, so they wanted to make him a little bit more Skeletor-y, let's say. This might have been before Skeletor, now that I think about it. But anyway, maybe they wanted to make him more cartoonish and less frightening, possibly, because of the kind of transition artwork they do for Johnny turning into Ghost Rider, which just gets better and better every time I see it, by the way. Don Perlin just masters that every time here. But I think that's the eyeball excuse, and they finally kind of drop it permanently by the end of this book. It's pretty much gone, like, at least leading up to like a third of the way through. But there's so many cool stories in here, man. And one of my favorite storylines in here is Ghost Rider number 35. It feels like a longer issue than it is. It may be like 5 pages longer. But guess what? This is written and penciled by Jim Starlin, dude. Yeah, Jim Starlin. Do you want to take a guess about what this issue is about? Now, it may contradict overall Marvel canonicity. I need to make a rant video about canon anyway, and how canonicity is just... Depending on what we're talking about, specifically with American comics and maybe like cartoons, that doesn't matter to me. And I'm less picky about it in older comics, to be honest with you. But anyway, Jim Starlin does a storyline. Mind you, he's the man who gave us the whole Infinity Gauntlet storyline. For anybody who has read that and saw how amazing his artwork is, the dude is a genius, man. So Jim Starlin does a storyline for his one-off, single-issue one-shot he does of Johnny Blaze, Ghost Rider, racing death itself on a motorcycle race out in the wilderness. And they keep coming across strangers, and Johnny realizes fairly quickly he's got to save these people or death will just touch them and kill them. But it's a race. And on motorcycles, in like a fucking canyon area. And dude, the art for that particular issue is probably the best in the whole book. As much as I love Don Perlin's work, as much as I love the earlier artist's work in the book too. It is so special how it's drawn. I had to go on Google because these Marvel Essential books are in black and white, and the art, especially in that issue, looks so good in this black and white copy for this Marvel Essential book. I went to Google to see what the pictures look like in color. Even if they were in color or not, I wasn't sure. I was pretty confident, and guess what? They were. And that Jim Starlin artwork, you would not believe how sick it looks, dude. It's detailed in a way that I think would make Berserk blush. You know what I mean? Like, it is fascinatingly gorgeous. But like I said, most of the book is like that. As the book goes on, it feels more and more like, almost like that Bill Bixby Hulk TV show, by the way, where it's kind of like Ghost Rider will go into a town, maybe for an issue or two. Again, most of these issues here seem to be standalone, but a lot of the time they're not. It was more uncommon for them to be standalone issues in this volume compared to Volume 1. Even when you have my boys like the Orb pop up, and I don't know if you remember the Orb, but he's the guy that's like, he has like a giant eyeball in his head, like for a helmet mask thing. Oh, he's awesome. I love the Orb. If we ever get another Ghost Rider like movie in the MCU, or whether it's not, I would love to see the Orb be a villain because he just looks cool. I think it would be fun and cartoonish and wild. So anyway, this was awesome. And the standalone issues are good. The two-parter, multi-parter issues are really good. They're beginning to do more with Johnny, but they keep kind of like changing up the stuff with him. Like, they approach him almost always as a kind of a Western cowboy type of hero where he'll just ride into a town, solve a problem with a villain or with a group of people, or get a job and then something happens to that employer. And then he loses the job because the employer's dead or paralyzed or anything. And then he takes care of the bad guys or a situation and he leaves. And you might have a one-off fun issue here. Like, you had like 1 or 2 issues dedicated to him trying to deal with another Daredevil type of dude. Not the character Daredevil, but like an Evel Knievel Daredevil that wanted to break Johnny's records. And there's like a big championship tournament thing between the two of them that would literally never happen nowadays outside of like a UFC fight. You know? But even that stuff was fun. And Johnny, they keep kind of tinkering with his powers. Because if you remember in Volume 1, most of the time, if I remember correctly, most of the time, maybe even leading into this book possibly, Johnny would turn into Ghost Rider at nighttime. And then during the daytime, he would just kind of be Johnny. And I never could figure out when the fuck does this dude sleep. And if I remember correctly, either by the end of Volume 1 or the very beginning here, it was more of he would only turn into Ghost Rider when danger was around. And throughout this book, they kind of jump back and forth. It can be either when danger is around, or he can will himself to turn into that whenever he wants. It can be a little bit of both, but they never, like, fully put their feet in the ground and make a stamp with their boot about what it's going to be, how it works. I don't know what the general, typical Ghost Rider transformation rules are. If you guys happen to know, it'd be cool to know, but you don't have to tell me that. You don't have to do, like, a Google search or anything. Don't worry about all that. But that would be cool to find out. I love learning about Ghost Rider. I love the art. I love the very biker-focused stuff. I'm sad about how, like, Johnny, every once in a while, will meet a girl that's pretty, he's into her, and then something terrible will happen. He has that typical, again, very Bill Bixby, Hulk, Peter Parker, Spider-Man influence before that type of feel as a character, but he's a tough guy. He's just a tough dude that he's a biker. He's a tough, like, kind of scary tough dude. But the Ghost Rider has so many cool moments, man. There are scenes of like him walking out of fire and stuff, like walking through fire sometimes. There's really badass issues, like even goofier issues with bad villains, like this guy called Nuclear Man. It's probably the worst issue in the book, aside from maybe the first two in here. The Nuclear Man issue is stupid, right? But at the end of it, they're at a nuclear plant. And you know those big tubes you see? Like, I think it was the same type of thing that Deadpool and Sabretooth and Wolverine fought on in X-Men Origins Wolverine. But Ghost Rider is riding up the side of that thing, trying to get ready to kill the bad guy, the Nuclear Man. It was so cool. Even in black and white, it was such a sick-ass picture. One of the coolest panels in the book, in my opinion, for such a rough issue, too. And I think it was a Don Perlin drawn issue, so that really shows his talent, even more than I've been preaching to you guys on this video. The book was so much fun, dude. Some of the bad guys here I really want to talk about, specifically one that I thought was the shit. It was an earlier issue, I want to say in the first, 4 or 5 issues. It may have been a Jim Shooter creation, by the way. I could be wrong. Maybe the Jim Shooter stuff, I don't think it was. It might have been Mackenzie's run with Don Perlin. But somebody was doing something with, shit, what is his name? Doctor Strange. I'm sorry, guys. I've been watching The Batman. Hugo Strange is on there, so it kind of threw me off. Doctor Strange is in here for a crossover for a few issues, and he and Johnny do not get along at all. But it was a great few issues, man. So well done. So beautifully drawn. But anyway, there's this one villain early on in the book, in probably the first 4 or so issues. I think it's a Jim Shooter issue, like I mentioned, of this kind of background story that eventually becomes a forefront plot about this guy named the Bounty Hunter. And the backstory for the Bounty Hunter is so badass, and he's looking for Johnny. And the Ghost Rider mainly, but he's looking for Johnny. He's probably going to have to kill him. And I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of stuff in this overall volume that really, really surprises me for a 70s, 80s style comic, release comic, for the kinds of things they could get away with back then. And this is kind of a kid's comic, you know? But it's not written for them. It's written like they're actually smart enough. This is written more for like a teenage audience. It's trying to be cool all the time, and dude, I think it succeeds at it. There is no trying to be cool. It's just a cool, badass character in a badass comic, doing cool things. Towards the end of the book, you have this last story in the book involving kind of a time travel story. I know that probably doesn't appeal to people, but it works because it's back in Western days with Indians and shit, and Johnny has to team up with this guy that I've never heard of. I thought it was going to be the original Ghost Rider, the one on a horse, but this guy is called the Night Rider. Literally never heard of this guy before. Not once. And he's cool looking. He's kind of like a completely dressed in white cowboy. But his powers are so fucking stupid. He doesn't really have powers. His, cape has powers. And I'm still so confused by the summary in here of what his powers are involving that cape. I get the general lore and myth. That stuff is cool about who he is as a person, as a character, and how he and Johnny cross paths and work together in that like old time travel-y story for an issue. But it's how the Knight Rider's like cloak cape thing works. It is so stupid. It is such a stupid thing when you think about the things that he's actually doing. I know this is sounding super complex and dumb of how I'm wording these things, and I'm making it more complicated sounding, but until you read it, you don't know how stupid it is. So I'm not even going to keep going down that road. I really enjoyed a lot of the villains here. Again, somebody like the Orb coming back, somebody like the new creations like the Bounty Hunter, all the Doctor Strange stuff I talked about for those crossover issues, all of that was so enjoyable and fun. I pretty much had fun from beginning to end, despite the rough issues like the Nuclear Man here and there. But man, I'm growing to love Johnny so much as a character, and Ghost Rider just gets cooler and cooler. I want to know more about these characters, or this character. I know there's supposed to be like a division between who the Ghost Rider is as a character. They kind of tease on that a little bit here, about how Johnny's beginning to lose control, by the way. I forgot to mention this earlier. He's starting to have moments, kind of like the black symbiote Spider-Man costume thing, where he's starting to have moments where he's starting to lose control, where Ghost Rider will just kind of show up. And at one point, they're completely split in the book, apart from each other. And that was okay. I liked that story fine. I didn't have an issue with it that much. It was just kind of something you see done all the time, like in Superman 3. But anyway, Ghost Rider from the Marvel Essential Volume 2 story, book, collection, whatever. This is a great omnibus, if you want to call it that. I still recommend these. These are kind of, again, they're kind of pricey. They can range between $25 and $40 nowadays. But man, I wish these were still in print. I wish the younger generation could get their hands on Ghost Rider easier, because like the Epic collections never stay in print. And these deserve that. Yeah, it's more of a niche audience than somebody like a Spider-Man or whatever, or like an X-Men. But dude, this was such a refreshing, good read. It's why when I made a video recently talking about manga or comics and which one I prefer, it's why I talked so much about American comics and how much I love the good eras that we had from like the 70s, in my opinion. That's what I like the beginnings of. All the way up to like right at 2010 for me personally, for my taste. And like I said, nowadays you'll get like a run here and there that might be good, or maybe something that appeals to me only. But this is the kind of thing that makes me say the 70s and 80s comics were the shit. It almost didn't matter who you picked up from DC or Marvel back then. It was like everything was special, man. And I'm loving that I'm going backward and checking out stuff for the first time. I couldn't recommend it more if you haven't read these Marvel Essentials of any character, much less Ghost Rider here. This is so worth the money. I promise you, if you check it out, you're probably going to love it. And again, you don't have to buy them in order and read them in order. You can do whatever you want. But anyway, what do you think about Johnny Blaze and Ghost Rider? What do you think about these Marvel Essentials? What did you think about this volume if you read it too? Let me know all that down below. Thank you all for watching, guys. God bless you all. Catch you later, and goodbye.